small bear can full of food, snacks, a resupply bag, toothbrush, toiletries, stuff like that for an overnight. For myself, for her, some food for the Pacers, and sleeping bags, sleeping pads, um, small stoves that we can make hot food for. And I left with her friend Ian, who was going to be doing some video work for her and potentially some pacing with her. So he and I headed out, and the idea was to go to the uphill lean-to in Feldspar and see if we could get lean-to between the two of them. Feldspar was the initial destination, so we headed up, and it was a grind. I was pretty tired. I had this gigantic backpack that was almost as big as me on, full of overnight supplies. But we got to the lean-to, and the first one we found, there was a couple people sound asleep in it, so we didn't bother them. And then the second lean-to, there was a gentleman in it who was not really keen to sharing, and his concern was social distancing with a group of people that were coming in. So we were respectful, and we also knew that we were going to be in and out of there and making a bunch of noise at night. So we really didn't want to bother anybody and spoil the whole thing by making people angry in the backcountry. So Ian and I continued down to the uphill lean-tos, which were all full. And at that point, we just said, all right, we're going to start heading down and see if there's any campsites or anything towards Lake Colden. And every campsite had at least 2 tents in it. Every lean-to had a couple people in it. It was busier than I've ever seen in the backcountry.
Mm-hmm.
So we just headed right over to the Marshall Trail, where it comes down from Herbert Brook, and kind of plopped our bags down and waited for Sarah there so that we could tell her that we were going to be spending the night in the dirt in the woods instead of in a lean-to, which in all, it probably is better anyways, because we didn't have to worry about disturbing anybody. We had our own area. We were all kind of trying to be quiet, but at the same time, it's late. Everybody's been up all day, and Sarah just needed to come in and crash.
Yeah,
so
that makes perfect sense. When Sarah told me that, I wanted to say, props to you and your crew and her and everyone for, you showed like an insane amount of humility, and I appreciate that tremendously. This sort of attempt, you could absolutely see somebody not caring if they're disturbing other people and kind of thinking what they're doing is bigger than what, the people who have the lean-to are doing right now. And you obviously could like easily take over. You have so many people, but on a human level, I really appreciate that. The humility that was shown, and you guys didn't want to disturb people because they're out there too. And, you guys are doing your thing, they're doing theirs. Let's, work around everyone else and make sure everyone's, feeling good and doing what they need to do. And I appreciate that just on a human level. That's really nice. And yeah, Sarah mentioned as soon as she fell asleep, it didn't matter. She was out cold. Obviously that makes sense. And for people listening, that's a long hike from the lodge out there. So you had your gigantic backpack. And then even when you're out there trying to find different lean-tos, they're still putting more and more miles and miles figuring out where to sleep. I guess that's the life of the crew member, though, at that point.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way it was. We just kind of sucked it up, and I had good company with Ian, so we had good conversation the whole time. He wasn't super familiar with the area. He's only been in the high peaks a little bit, so it was good to have somebody to kind of share some stories about the mountains and a little bit of history, and it was a really good distraction while we were out there. And at one point, I said, well, there's no lean-tos. And he said, what do we do now? I said, well, we just sleep on the dirt. So that's what we're going to do.
There it is. Going camping.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
That's camping.
That's
and,
it.
It's not like we didn't have sleeping pads or anything. So luckily it wasn't raining. It was a cool night, but we were all so tired. As soon as we got in our sleeping bags, those couple hours that we slept was heaven. We didn't care how cold it was.
Yeah, I could imagine. So now you guys had to call an audible with where you're sleeping versus like where you planned to sleep. So you guys had to be on the trail to make sure Sarah doesn't run past you, I would have to think, unless you were able to communicate to her, hey, we're at X, this is where we're sleeping tonight. Or did you have to wait on the trail so that she sees you doesn't run past you going further to those other lean-tos?
Uh, well, the initial plan was that I would set up in Feldspar and then kind of take a resupply little bag over to her at the base of Marshall. Um, but at the time when she dropped off of Iroquois to go to Marshall, Jan had sent me a message to let me know where they were and that a nap after Marshall was a possibility instead of them continuing on to do Colden before coming over to the lean-to and resting. So that's when we knew things were kind of going to change a little bit. And when I couldn't find a lean-to, I messaged them with the alarm and said, lean-tos are all full. We'll meet you at the bottom of Marshall.
Okay,
So
got
they
it.
knew when they got to the bottom that we'd be sitting there waiting there. And that's when we had to kind of say, all right, we're going to take a nap now. And instead of going to do Colden, taking a nap, and then Redfield and Cliff, we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to take a nap and then just do Colden and keep on going to Redfield and Cliff and continue the day as would have been. So that's where having a couple of pacers all there at the right time, we were able to make that decision and everybody was on board with it. It was very fluid. She needed to sleep, and sleep now was more important than marching. And everybody agreed. We made a group decision, and everybody was on board with it. And Jan went out. Ian stayed with us. We all camped out for a couple hours, got up and had a little bit of breakfast, the old morning pep talk, and just got ready to roll.
Yeah, there we go. So now was Sarah making the ultimate decisions on this, or did she kind of leave it to, maybe you guys as the crew on like kind of like a coach level to kind of change it up the plan a little bit? Who made that final decision?
It was a group decision.
Okay, cool.
I had already kind of started thinking when John had mentioned that she might need to take a nap. I said, all right, well, here's how we're going to need to kind of try and redirect our plans. And they had already had a discussion on their way down. I mean, if anybody's going to come up with a good rework plan, it's going to be Jan.
Sure.
He knows them better than any of us. So when we all met, we discussed it and said, all right, this is the right decision. She agreed. And she was ready for some food, sleep. And then she was ready to start marching when she woke back up. And ultimately, going up Colden from Lake Colden on that steep trail is one of her favorite trails because it's one of the steeper ones. So it was a good way for her to start her next day.
Her favorite trail because it's one of the steeper ones. Man, that is a glutton for pain right there. That's funny. It is a great trail, though. It is fast, too, especially on a dry day. You can just zip right up that trail, despite it being so steep. All right, so she went up Colden, so she got the nap. So obviously that is, she slept in the dirt. You guys got the nap. You changed your plans. And now, from a crew standpoint, so she took off for Colden. Now, what did your day look like at that point?
Well, we start out by her waking up, and that was changing the wraps on her feet. We had taken them off for the night before for her to sleep with her feet up and let her feet breathe. That really, I think, was a big part of why her feet survived so well overall. And then she had some really good antibacterial cream that we put on her feet, wrapped her feet, put her fresh socks on, got her some hot breakfast, gave her the old pep talk. You're doing great. Let's keep going. It's going to be a good day. And then I packed up all the gear. She and Ian kind of just stretched out a little bit, made a couple jokes, got ready for the day. And then I actually followed them over to the trail up Colden. They continued on up Colden, and I continued out to the lodge.
All right. So real quick before we move on to that. So you mentioned her feet were wrapped, and that's part of the reason her feet held up so well. What exactly was the wrap on her feet? Or like, what was that? What did that look like?
Well, I think part of the reason her feet held up so well is because she let them breathe every night. She took her socks off, and then we had a co-band wrap that was kind of like a soft cast for her ankle and her foot. That she was having all the issues with her Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it a little bit more rigid was helping. So we of course have to take that off, relieve the compression when she goes to sleep. So in the morning we would have to rewrap it, and at that point we would kind of do an overhaul on her feet where we put a little more Leuko tape on her toes, rewrap the toe band, put the antibacterial cream on her feet, and then slide the socks on, slide shoes on, and away she would go.
Okay.
And it was kind of a routine that we did each morning after, I would say, day 2 is when we started doing that every day. When she finished, I think her feet actually looked better than mine did. So
nice.
I think it worked.
All right. So she took off. You guys walked together to Colden. She took off up Colden, and you headed out to the lodge. I would assume with a lot of gear on your back, pretty much the whole backpack again at that point, other than a little bit less food, probably.
A little less food, but I actually had Ian's sleeping gear as well
Okay.
at this point. So I had 3 people's sleeping bags and sleeping pads. A little less food, a little less water, and I was able to give him her entire aid bag. So she had like a gallon Ziploc bag that she would put electrolyte mix in, snacks in. It was specifically designed for the amount of calories that she thought that she would need to take in during that period of time before her next aid station. So he had that, and then there was a little bit of a bag for the pacer with nutrition as well. So I probably lost about 5 pounds just in food and snacks and everything between the pacer bag, the aid bag, and what we ate that night. So my bag was a little bit lighter. It was a little bigger because of the extra sleeping bag and stuff, but it was a nice, easy walk out. I actually saw the sunrise over Lake Colden and Avalanche Lake, so it was pretty peaceful, and I didn't see a person until I got to the end of Avalanche Lake.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's definitely a great spot to be at that point by yourself. So there's a little bit of a benefit to that at that point. Cool. So you had to go back to the lodge. So what else? What was that for? What was your plan that you had to do?
From the lodge, I would kind of head actually back to Saranac, try and take a nap for a little while, and just get a little bit of rest. And my dog was actually at Sarah's house. Her roommate was taking care of him, but I like to stop back and maybe have breakfast and say hello to him for a little bit and watch Sarah's tracker to see where she was.
So you had a little bit of a break, even just a mental break for a minute, or I guess more physical than mental at this point, but a slight break. You had a slight break, so that's good.
Yes. And going back, seeing my dog, playing fetch with him for a few minutes is a good break from running around in the backwoods.
Totally. So day 3, how did it go for Sarah, and then what was your next task to manage?
So day 3 for Sarah started out really strong, and it was fun to watch her that day because I could also see Alyssa's tracker, and I saw that Alyssa was on the Great Range, and they were kind of heading towards each other. So I actually messaged Sarah on her Garmin inReach and said, "Hey, I think you guys might cross paths today." We knew it might happen. We thought it might happen, and we thought it would be kind of cool if they did cross paths. This was the only time that they would, and it was short and sweet. They said hello, got some pictures, and one went up towards Lake Tier and one went down. They went on their own way, and I think it definitely gave Sarah a little extra oomph because I watched her tracker quickly get up to Lake Tier, then quickly get up Gray, and then shoot over to Skylight. And she was on the move. She was moving better than she had all morning.
Cool.
And knowing that she had the Great Range ahead of her, that's kind of one of her favorite sections of the Adirondacks. So being in the daylight, being in one of her favorite areas, we all had a pretty good feeling at this point that she still had a chance to even up for the day at the total of peaks with Alyssa. So it was an encouraging day for sure for all of us. And she made pretty good time for a while on the Great Range until it started getting a little darker. Again, it just kind of slowed her down a little bit. But she got some pizza, which was out of the blue.
Yeah, pizza up on Gothics. That helps.
I was on the phone with Aaron, and he said, "Did you just get this message?" I said, "What message?" He goes, "Pizza and mashed potatoes on Gothics." Oh, he's like, I guess I'm going to get some pizza and something to take to her on Gothics.